Live. How you doing, everybody? If you're a Mets fan or whoever you're a fan of, it's your boy Wardy, and we're back at it with our latest post game here this spring training as the New York Metropolitans take down the Washington Nationals by a final score of 6-3. Who was the leader in the offense today? It was Trayce Thompson, Klay Thompson's brother. Absolutely torched the Nationals today, that we'll get into as one of the key highlights. Unfortunately, today's game wasn't televised, which was exactly why I initially wasn't planning to do a post-game show today, but between the individual player performances that we saw, headlined not only by Trayce Thompson, but guys who are competing for spots like Max Kranick, who I have a lot to say about on the starting pitching front. Luisangel Acuna's swing maybe isn't as broken as you initially thought. Jet Williams getting on base and going first to third, but he's ultimately scoring, and so much in between to break down from today's game. And I want to give a shout out as well. Let me actually pull up the guy's name, because there was someone on Twitter, a Nationals fan, that went out of his way to live stream behind home plate today on Twitter. And actually, oh, now it's disappeared. I forget the gentleman's name, so I apologize. But there was a fan in attendance today that did God's work by sitting, a couple rows behind home plate and live stream the entire game. So if you guys were live on X, then you were able to check that out. I watched the majority of this ball game. We saw some highlights, of course, including the ones that you see here in the show. There wasn't too much provided from SNY and everyone else today, but no less, we have planned to get into. Shout out to my man Anthony at Subway to Shea for being such an awesome, not only supporter of mine, but truly just thank you so much for the kind words. That means a lot. Appreciate everyone first chiming in live and on replay as we react together and I break down and analyze what were the biggest takeaways from a spring training game. Because as I've been saying the past 48 hours, folks, again, the actual result of the game means very little to me, at least as a fan. What I care about is these individual performances ultimately and these position battles. And the rotation is the big one with Kodai Senga on the shelf and Max Kranick, who initially is on the outside looking in to compete for a rotation spot, just made the best case imaginable here to kick off spring training, as he went not only two shutdown innings, two perfect innings for the New York Metropolitans today. So we'll get into more on Max here in a second. But again, appreciate everyone first chiming in. Thank you guys. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button, as it is the easiest and best way to support the channel. Shout out to my great friends there at BetUS, as they are America's #1 sports book. Make sure to check them out today by clicking the link in the description. That way you too get 125% boost with your not 1, 2, but 3 deposits. That means if you deposit $100, you automatically get $225 to work with. They got you covered with all your sports betting needs. We're going to be doing some awesome, unique WardyNYM picks, props, and parlays throughout the regular season that you guys can do along with me, and we react live in post-game shows. So again, make sure to check them out down below. Really does mean a lot. But let's talk more about this game, okay? Because obviously there were a lot of things that stood out, and naturally in spring training, you like to take a lot of things with a grain of salt. However, when it comes to position battles, top prospects really making their debuts, ultimately guys that are expected to crack the bigs at some point this year too, a lot of fans, including myself, get pretty pumped up about the prospect, no pun intended, of said players. And today we saw in center field, Drew Gilbert got the start for the Mets. He did not record a hit. I can't tell you for certain how every single one of his at-bats looked, but overall he did go, I think, 0 for 3 or 0 for 4 today, that being Drew. 0 for 3 today. He did get a walk, however, so that wasn't too bad. Drew Gilbert started in center to look very strong there defensively from what we could see, which again was not great footage. There was some footage we got, and so far it looked okay. We saw there Luisangel Acuna getting the start at second base, in which he looked absolutely tremendous today. Not only defensively with the routine plays, doubling up whatever they need to be, but also his bat-to-ball abilities, what stood out to me so much today, and that's why he is one of the big focal points in today's discussion. And on top of that, we also saw other guys like Jet Williams later on in the game, again, making an immediate impact once he got on the base paths, using his speed, which is what he's known for best. He's an on-base god, and he goes first to third like no tomorrow. You'd think he's Trey Turner out there with those legs. That is how fast he is at the great size of 5'6" or so, just like myself. So we got a fellow short king in the biz. So is Luisangel Acuna and Drew Gilbert. None of these guys are even 5'10". So finally, the short kings are uniting together. The only difference between them and I is that they're uber talented, and I'm just a schmuck that likes to talk about them for a living. That is what separates us. But what has stood out to me so much about this? Well, before we even get there, actually, I do want to briefly share with you all a move the Mets made yesterday, because it's nothing drastic. It's nothing overly significant at this point in time, but it's it's worthy of a quick discussion because it is a roster spot. The Mets claim Colton Ingram, southpaw reliever, 27 years of age, off waivers from the Detroit Tigers as they put David Pearson to the 60-day IL. Ingram, who's only been in pro ball since 2019 when he was drafted, had himself pretty strong performances at the minor league level, a solid K rate ranging from 10 to 12 plus K per nine. The walk rate fluctuate a little bit, but so far he's looked good in the minor leagues. And at the MLB level, had a little taste last year, 5 or so innings because the Angels rushed him up as a surprise absolutely nobody, and he ultimately didn't have the best outings in only 5 innings, but again, it was such a small sample size, so the Mets find themselves another lively arm, a young one with upside who will be on the outside looking in to compete for this bullpen this year, and you can never have enough arms. So that is the latest update on Mets acquisitions, but now let's get into this ball game. And guys, I really think we should start talking about Max Kranick. I got to talk about Max Kranick, guys. Again, if you're following along today, if you guys know, Max Kranick was a waiver pickup by the Mets this offseason. He was DFA'd there by the Pittsburgh Pirates, if I'm not mistaken. He grew up a diehard Mets fan from Pennsylvania, literally just like me. He was a season ticket holder with his kids, with his parents growing up. When he was a kid himself, they went to basically every game at Chase Stadium over the weekend for his entire, his upbringing, pretty much. So this is a real full circle moment for him, Max Kranick, today, and he looked absolutely phenomenal on the bump today. And what stood out most to me about Max Kranick, it was his ability to get out major league batters. Okay, this is the same Max Kranick today that faced CJ Abrams, that faced Lane Thomas, that faced Joey Gallo, Keeper Ruiz, Jesse Winker, and he didn't allow a single hit. And in very Jesse Winker and Joey Gallo, big lefty bat, big loopy swing fashions, he struck out both said batters. So lots to like there for Max Kranick today. His second inning was 10 pitches, all in the zone. They were all strikes, baby. He looked sharp, and you could tell this hits home for him a little bit. Again, this is personal matter because this is something he grew up with. You know how it's personal for me, guys, as a diehard fan. I get to talk about the Mets every day, make a bit of a living out of it. It's amazing. I can only imagine what it's like to be in his shoes, the same way to a higher magnitude we have with Steve Cohen and with David Stearns. Now we got a starting pitcher who grew up a Mets fan who got picked up by them this offseason, and the reason why he was cut is just because he hasn't pitched. He's coming back off of Tommy John surgery, if I'm not mistaken, so he's really getting ramped up again. And Kranick has the potential. He's a former top 100 prospect in Major League Baseball. He's got the tools there. Now it's about seeing how good are they going to look throughout the entirety of spring, and ultimately, what kind of role is he going to have in the organization this year? Could Max Kranick play his way into a 5th or 6th rotation spot for the Mets? Bigger things have surprised me in Mets land, so I guess we'll find out. All I know is Max Kranick at the young age of 26, 27 or so is a name to keep an eye on big time this spring, along with the more grizzled vets, the guys who have been in the org for a little bit, the Jose Butos, the Joey Lucchese's, and the Tyler McGills, all competing for that respective 5th rotation spot. Lots to like there about Max Kranick today. Jason said, whatever happened to Steven Ridings? What's the deal? Ridings isn't with the team. He had struggles last year too, still coming back from injuries. The Mets did not return him. That's pretty much the case with Eddie. Old video you guys have seen me do talking about a waiver pickup or something. Those pitchers, if they're over the past year, probably aren't in the organization now because a lot of those guys rotate, and that's why they're wildcard pickups. What was the velocity on Kranick's fastball? Unfortunately, Jason, we weren't getting documentation on that today. They had a little info that they were providing. You can't even go through Baseball Savant. If you look up the game today, it'll reroute you to MLB.com's website, not Baseball Savant, where you find out all the exit velos and how hard they're throwing and their horizontal movement, their horizontal break, their vertical break, all these things. So unfortunately, we don't have that information, but if I'm not mistaken, he was definitely sitting mid-90s on the gun because that was his arsenal that I know prior to the Mets, having him pitch today. When they first acquired him, I looked him up. He does have a very lively arm. The off-speed pitches looked good today too. So there was plenty positives from Max Kranick's Mets debut today as he was leading the charge on the pitching front. And to speak just a little bit more on pitching, because this is the last I want to talk about the pitching until after I break down all the hitting heroics today, if you will. But we saw Max Kranick, Tyler Stewart, who is a Mets pitching prospect, who is a very sleeper pitching prospect too. A guy that I think is going to have another good year for the Mets, was very strong in minor leagues last year, pitched 2 scoreless innings for the day. Sean Reed-Foley, remember him, guys? Yes, SRF is back from injury. He is looking to crack this Mets bullpen at some point this season, if it's not to begin opening day. He had himself a scoreless inning, including 2 strikeouts. I don't know. Unfortunately, I think Foley's name unfortunately got into the second bar there, but Eric Orzi got worked again. Unfortunately, a name that a couple years ago seemed like he could be potentially a new weapon for the Mets bullpen. Just hasn't materialized so far in his young professional career. Has a solid arsenal, but just has not really impressed too much for the Mets thus far. Then we have Robinson and Suarez to round things out. Two guys that, again, are on the outside looking in. Ones that are not going to be impacting the Mets anyway this year, and that's all you have on the pitching front. So Stewart definitely impressed me today. SRF having that scoreless innings nice, especially because whether you guys like it or not, Sean Reed-Foley is in the mix for the Mets relief pitching options. He's not a favorite by any stretch, but he is a guy that is a multi-inning reliever, and the Mets are going to be looking for that type of help, especially with Kodai Senga out to start the season. So SRF, remember the name, whether you love it or not, he is not out of the org. He's not out of sight yet, so hopefully he can be productive if he's called upon at all this season. Also, again, it would not be a WardyNYM live stream without somehow messing that up again with the intro. I apologize there, guys. I really do. Now let's, yes, Montez Dioca is cut with his surgery. That is true. Flamethrower, that unfortunately is still not healthy enough for the Mets here to be pitching, from my understanding. But yes, the Mets have a healthy competition, which is awesome. And what is also awesome, in my opinion, is the offense that we saw today from some of these guys. And let's talk for a minute about Luis Angel Acuna, okay? Trayce Thompson was the big story today, but don't get it twisted. Luis Angel Acuna, in my opinion, is the biggest offensive takeaway. This is a guy that, again, struck out silly in his first, at-bat or so with the Mets organization in spring training this spring. Their first game, a 98 hitter with late movement, just absolutely caught him sorting it up. It was a terrible swing, but it was a really, really good pitch in defense there against those Cardinals. Then we find out today, what does he do? Rips a couple hits. What was so impressive? Acuna's first hit today was roped beautifully in the gap there for a single opposite field, and it was off of Josiah Gray. Now, I understand it's spring training, so especially for veterans like himself that have been in the game for a couple years now, especially after having a very nice 2023, Josiah Gray is such an underrated starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. Lively arm, lots to like about him. Not what I like against the Mets, because he definitely has had some solid outings against the team. Point being is that even if he's just honing in on just getting his arsenal comfortable and things like that, it is too equally as impressive for Acuna to be hitting off of Josiah Gray, timing the way that he did as well as he did. It wasn't like it just hit in the dirt and he was able to leg one out for a single. No, he roped it well. It was a nice contact, solid hit there by Acuna, and then he would follow it up with his second hit of the day, would go 2 for 2, and then ultimately go for 2 for 3 in his eye. DJ Stewart, as you see there, would get himself his first hit of spree today too. Pete Alonso doing what he does best, and that is hitting doubles or home runs. We had 2 extra base hits for the Polar Bear today. First of which, what looked like from the highlights, it was a third trickler that went down the third baseline, and that got him to second base on a double. The second one was in the gap and was just short of a home run. And Pete Alonso, again, with 2 extra base hits on the day. We're going to be hammering him on the over for 2 or more bases a lot when we do our WardyNYM parlays throughout the year. So make sure you guys are locked in on that for my fellow sports bettors out there that like to have fun. So talking about Pete Alonso there, nice outing for him. And what stood out too was, yes, Trayce Thompson. Let's talk about Trayce, guys. For those that don't know, Trayce Thompson, he's been a journeyman outfielder. 2 years ago, really balled out with the LA Dodgers, had 13 bombs out of nowhere, but in a very LA Dodgers type fashion, had that little electric, lightning in a bottle type performance, and really hasn't been much at the MLB level since then. He's a journeyman and he's been with plenty of teams in the league, solid, decent defender, at absolute best league average there in the corner. A little versatile for you. Again, the bat, though, while fluctuates quite a bit, is a fringe MLB caliber bat, which is something that in years past, the Mets didn't have proper depth at the AAA level. As things currently stand, Trayce Thompson and Ben Gamel are their 5th and 6th outfield options. Drew Gilbert is probably their... Actually, Drew Gilbert, you could probably argue, is their 8th if you want to put DJ Stewart in that outfield mix, too, even though I have quite a bit to be desired when looking at the defense there for DJ Stewart. He profiles best as a DH, in my humble opinion. I'll stand by that, regardless of how strong his arm is, as things currently stand at least. Point being is that Trayce is a guy that's likely going to be called up if there's an injury to any outfielder, right? He's going to be one of the first guys the Mets look upon. They're not going to call up Drew Gilbert right away because they don't want to rush him up. Drew is 100% going to crack the bigs this year, just a matter of when. And the Mets want to make sure that they call him up when they deem, one, he's ready, and 2, that he's able to handle a full workload of pretty much being an everyday player. So in the meantime, with Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, Harrison Bader, Tyrone Taylor-Bader, especially, we know how injury-prone he is, unfortunately. So if injuries inevitably do happen to either of these guys, Ben Gamble, Trace Thompson are the guys you call upon. And Trace today absolutely killed it, had himself a couple hits, 5 RBIs, thanks to a grand salami that blew the doors open in this one and ultimately gave the Mets the victory. Lovely production there from Trace Thompson. Then would follow it up with an RBI single today too. So a lot of RBIs for Trace. He led the charge for the Mets offense. And again, a veteran bat who knows what it takes to win as well. Plenty of MLB experience, a savvy guy to have in the locker room, and again, to call upon if you need to at any point this season. Those are the type of veterans I like, especially guys that aren't too grizzled. Again, he's still very much, I would say, in the peak prime of his respective career. It was awesome his turnout a couple years ago with the Dodgers. Hasn't had some as much success since then. However, though, I think that says more on the Dodgers' ability to get the best out of players than anything else. So it'll be curious to see how the Mets utilize him, if at all, this season. So we saw there Trace Thompson, and as we look through the lineup today too, the Mets starting lineup, if I did not reiterate that already today, was the following. Leading off was Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, Brett Beatty. Brett the Met went 0 for 2 today, but did have a run scored. Trace Thompson there batting fourth, 2 for 3 with the 5 RBIs. Drew Gilbert there afterwards. Acuna, Tomasino, who did record a hit today. Kowali in right field, and that did it for the starters. And take a look at this, guys. Jet Williams, Jet the Met today. He got himself on base by beating out an infield hit, doing his best Starling Marte impression that we all know. And in his best Starling Marte impression, went first to third, thanks to a wild pitch, got him to second base, and then got to third base on a throwing error. He would ultimately then score afterwards on a force-out play. Why is that so important? Because that's the Jet Williams MO. For those that aren't aware, Jet Williams is a high contact, high OBP, speedy mofo out there, whether he's at short, whether he's in center field, whether he's at second base. Wherever you play him, Jet Williams is an absolute speed demon. And we saw that on full display yesterday as he stole a bag, and we see it on full display again, going first all the way to home and hand with those legs. That is a difference maker right there. And when Jet Williams is called up this season, you're going to see him get on base at quite a clip that's going to leave you impressed. Again, he's not going to overwhelm you with the power per se, even though that he does hit pretty hard, especially for his size. I mean, seriously, like, there are some people out there, because it's hard to comp someone like Jet Williams at his size that are good MLB players, because there really aren't a lot of great MLB players that came at that size. However, of course, you have Jose Altuve with that massive leg kick that always baffles me how good he is with his timing with that leg kick. And then you, of course, have someone like Dustin Pedroia, which many argue find themselves in the Jet Williams category more when comparing the two, mainly because Jet Williams is a gritty guy. His ability to go out there and do everything defensively humanly possible and on the bags is similar in that Pedroia way. I don't know. I can't speak too much, of course, for the young man and how he is with his personality too much in the clubhouse, but, you know, that shouldn't matter too much, especially for someone like him right now, just about getting his feet wet at the MLB level. When I met Jet last year and had the privilege of interviewing him, very good, very humble, very smart with his answers, and certainly someone as I think is really starting to blossom now, as we've seen over the past calendar year, into becoming now the Mets' top prospect and one of the top prospects in all of Major League Baseball. It's remarkable seeing the production that he's had for his size, and I cannot emphasize that enough as a short schmuck myself. Seriously, I mean, it is really remarkable to see how far he's come, and I really hope he blossoms into quite the MLB player, because I'm going to be rooting as hard as anyone for Jet Williams when looking at these Mets fans. So I do see some comments here. You cracked me up on X with fans talking shit because of Acuna's swing. Yeah, it's just because after we saw Acuna get sorted a couple of days ago, yeah, everyone was joking about it, and that's fine. But there was a contingency of fans I dealt with both on YouTube and on Twitter, and they know who they are, who are actually being dead serious when shit talking not Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, like saying like his swing will never be MLB level caliber, off of a 98 late movement that everyone would have got pieced up if they tried matching up with. Like, it cracked me up. So it was nice to see Acuna kind of shut that up fast today for the fans. That, again, the fans out there, it baffled me as many fans as there were that were actually being serious, because I can tell the difference when you're being sarcastic on Twitter. I do it all the time, and some people don't realize that, especially when I'm like, oh my goodness, let's extend this guy to a decade-long contract. Like, I'm obviously exaggerating or, completely joking, but point is, some people take it too seriously. We all know that, and that is Mets fandom if I've ever seen it. Seriously. And outside of Jet Williams that we saw today, I want to see if there were any other key takeaways from today's game. There really weren't. I mean, Zach Short, I'll say this, Zach Short, who's been playing all over the infield for the Mets, has been playing some really good defense for them. So Short is not a guy that's known for, this great upside with his offense. However, if he does play for the Mets at all this year, it will be because of his defensive upside. I mean, Short's defensive upside is so good that the Mets may find themselves in a position where if Joey Wendell is underwhelming, especially with the defense, when that's basically all you're getting from him, that is where someone like Zach Short could find himself slotting in, and maybe the Mets cut Wendell. Not that I wish it, just saying they have solid depth battles going on right now with guys who are either above average defenders and, are lackadaisical bats. Hence the story, what I feel like plenty of guys in this organization, unfortunately, but the point still stands. The battles so far have been healthy. They've been good, and I know we're going to get tired of spring quick. I mean, we're talking about our third spring game, and it's February 26th. Telling you guys right now, I'm not covering every single spring game, obviously. I'm going to cover a bulk of them for sure. There will be non-televised games that I do not cover because I was not able to be as locked in on it, so it's difficult. You don't want to talk about something where you didn't even watch it. I at least watched a good chunk today, literally through someone's live stream on Twitter. So at least that makes sense why I'm talking about it now. But especially if I miss the game in its entirety and it's a spring game, it's not televised and there's little highlights, unless we see key, and I truly mean like key performances kind of like today, I'm not going to go out of my way to cover those. So you're going to see a good mix of spring training coverage of post games this spring, along with a nice mix of individual video and live stream content that is separate from the games. I'm going to be doing a recording tomorrow with Giraffe Neck Mark, which will be uploaded tomorrow or, in the ensuing days, which is going to be a fun topic to get into. We got some awesome stuff cooking separate from that as well that has other guests involved. So a lot of things are on the horizon here, and I appreciate everyone that's been following along throughout this entire process. Wardy, March 15th to 17th, I'll be in Port St. Lucie for some games. That is awesome, Ricky. You're breaking my heart, though, Ricky. I'm going to miss you by 2 games. I'm going to be there. I am 100% going to be there at spring training this year, guys. And right now, I'll let you know, without getting into the details as to the exciting stuff of it just yet, March 9th to the 13th, your boy's going to be at spring training. So for my fans out there that are planning to go spring this year, if you guys want a chance to meet me, talk shop, watch some of the game together, whatever it may be, make sure you are there from the 9th to the 13th. So that's where you guys will catch me. I'll be along with some awesome fellow YouTubers that you guys all know very well for the most part. We're going to be making a lot of content while we're there and a lot of fun content while we're there. So be on the lookout. That'll be coming in a couple weeks. Very, very excited for that. And to everyone that's been in attendance at spring training thus far, I hope you guys have been having a fantastic time. We didn't hear it today because there wasn't a televised broadcast, but I have to imagine there was at least one kid, at least in parts in the game, yelling for those Mets. I know that they were at the Nationals facilities, which I'll tell you guys who had the pleasure of being at the Nats and Astros facility last spring training, it is split. They both host it there. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful spring facility. One of the better ones I've actually seen. As nice as PSL is, Port St. Lucie for the Mets, that stadium is really nice and it's newer too. And it's funny because they actually built it like shortly before the Astros ended up losing to the Nationals in the World Series. So it's kind of funny how that all shaped up. But I know at the Mets games that have been hosted home, the first 2, there's one specific little Mets fan out there that is either Mets fans are loving or Mets fans want nothing to do with because he is going after it. Like, think of the dog. Think of the dog in Grown Ups. If you guys have seen the movie Grown Ups, the dog just is barking the whole time. Like, what is that? It's the kid yelling the entire time. Let's go Mets, or let's go Jet, or let's go Acuna, or let's go Drew. Like whoever it is, the entire game. And it reminds me so much of when I've been to a Cyclones game back when Alvarez was on the team there a couple years ago, and the same exact thing happened. I'm sitting right behind home plate, locked in, and we were getting at least 1 or 2 kids. Actually, this was a grown adult, just the entire game. Like doing his best Frank Fleming impression. At least he wasn't being negative, though. I guess that's the only plus, right? But, and why Underground Pete is going to spring train, awesome. Will not be catching him, though, because he's going to be at the Yanks facilities, I'm sure, and that's nowhere near where I'll be. I'm not going to Yanks Phillies facilities this year. I'm going to be in Port St. Lucie. Next year, though, is where things may change. Next year, I may finally be able to cover the Yanks, Blue Jays, Phillies side of things there in that Tampa or Fort Lauderdale area, wherever they are. might go to Arizona. Not sure yet what next year is going to have planned, but this year is going to be a lot of fun. I know that. Do I think the Mets should have gone with Bellinger? No, considering they had no shot of making that happen. That was never going to happen. So no, Jason. Zach Short's mom was my 4th grade teacher. That is such an odd flex, Doyle, but I love every aspect of that. That's amazing. That's like the equivalent when you guys joke how there are players' moms like in my DMs, because I'm friends with multiple players on the teams and their parents. Literally, that cracks me up. That's pretty funny. That's a good one. It's not even a joke. I don't know why, but that's so odd. It's so small world in all the right ways. But having said that all, everybody, I think that is about going to wrap up the show. So before I get out of here, I'll take another question or 2 or 3 you guys got for me, and then that'll do it. But again, the Mets win by a final score of 6-3 today. The highlights consisted of Trace Thompson making a name for himself today, Max Kranick making it known that he's a force to be reckoned with competing for this rotation. Again, it might be a small sample size, but he is the best looking pitcher that we've seen so far through these 3 games. And the most impressive part, he faced an MLB caliber lineup today. That is the difference. That is why I have my feeling and viewpoint about Max the way that I do. It stands out just a little bit more than if he was, of course, just facing straight minor leaguers. Acuna, of course, getting it known with a couple hits today. Jet the Met with the awesome, truly fantastic base running once again. Lots of key takeaways from today's game. Who do you think will win the bullpen job? It's a great question. Honestly, it's such a toss-up for the bullpen because there's a lot of very good and I think worthy options that the Mets currently have. I really don't have an answer for you if I'm going to be quite frank, because there's multiple that I think have a great argument and a great chance. And on top of it, how the bullpen starts to begin the season is going to look significantly different versus how the season ends. It's going to be ever-changing. David Stearns has made that known. A lot of moving parts are going to be happening. So even if a guy doesn't say start the year in the Mets bullpen, it may not take him long to get called up, because we all know how ever-flowing these moves are, right? So it's a very common thing. Mets could get Bellinger next year if he opts out. It'll be better with another year of sample size. And I'll say this about Bellinger if he opts out. Belly is a guy I could definitely see the Mets pivoting to if they falter in the Soto sweepstakes. And the Soto sweepstakes we're going to talk about a lot this year. It's going to piss off Yanks fans, which means I'm going to have absolutely no problem talking about it. Shout out to you, Pat, my co-host of the Bridging the Gap podcast. In all seriousness, though, we're going to talk about Soto a lot this year, who hit another nuke today in spring training. So if he isn't locked in for a walk here, as he's going to be looking for probably Ohtani money, which he does not deserve and should not get, it's going to be a big year for sure. Do you think Cohen and Stearns will look to keep Pete and go after Soto? 1,000%. 100%. They're going to push hard to land both. And, of course, meaning that they're going to push hard to land both. I'm not getting my hopes up on landing both. The goal, though, is that you bring Pete back and you can do everything you can to land Soto, and it isn't for a lack of effort. I really, really, really do think that Soto to Queens is not as impossible as a lot of fans, especially Yanks fans. The funny thing about Yanks fans, too, with this overwhelming confidence, like, look, depending on how the year goes, yeah, like Soto could be swayed to want to stay with you guys, but he's not going to extend with you. He's going to hit the open market for absolute certain. So I think Soto's going to go to the highest bidder at the end of the day. And if Steve Cohen is determined the way that we've seen him be in the past, no one's going to pass him in that bidding. There's a difference with going after Juan Soto versus going after Yoshinobu Yamamoto, when, again, you had the offer on the table that was enough that Yamamoto was looking for. And Yamamoto did actually consider the Mets more than maybe you initially believed, considering he denied a higher contract from the Phillies because he clearly didn't want to go there. So I'm sure the Phillies threw out a long-term deal last minute just for the sake of hopes that, okay, we can try to snag him. So I think the Mets' efforts in free agency has been very strong since Cohen has become owner, and that'll continue to a magnitude probably unlike ever before heading into this upcoming offseason, which is saying a lot. But I don't want to talk about that right now. I just want to wrap this up talking about this game because I was very happy to see this takeaways from today's game, and overall Max Kranick, man. I'm pumped. I'm excited to see more from him. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for consistent coverage on all things Mets all off-season long. If any news, trades, signings happen, rest assured we will, of course, cover them. Aside from that, though, and key topics that we'll be discussing on the channel going further, I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, night, evening. And whenever you're watching this, Mets take Game 3 of spring training by a final score of 6-3. We'll be back at it again real soon.